Hello, and welcome to another discussion of or another episode of Own Your Yes Live. I am your host, Valera Wilson, and this is our weekly conversations as ambitious women who really are learning through hearing the stories of other ambitious women how to thrive despite the challenges on the way to success. And so I am so happy that we get to have this conversation every Thursday, noon to noon 30 Eastern. And I'm so delighted today to bring to everyone Denise Johnson, who is the COO of Stratyfy, and she's going to share more about her background. But we're going to talk today about, not allowing people to underestimate us. And that is a loaded statement as a woman of, of diverse backgrounds. We all find ourselves in situations where we might be underestimated. And that label can often challenge us. But Denise is going to talk to us about her journey on how to not let people underestimate her. Denise, why don't you share with us your background?
Thank you, Valera, for hosting me. And it is an absolute joy to be here. A very short info about my background. I have close to 3 decades of healthcare and financial services technology background, leading product and technology teams in global companies. Then I have moved to working with startups, specifically fintechs, and been an advisor, startup advisor. I'm on the board of a number of startups, fintechs, and I'm also currently teaching fintech and financial innovation at Northeastern University, along with the above listed things I've done.
Wow, that's amazing. I mean, you are a busy woman. I mean, you teach fintech, you're a C-suite leader, and you're an advisor to startups and on board. So let's talk about this. I mean, whoa, talk about not underestimating you. Who would want to do that with the resume that you have? But obviously, I know, as you know, I'm saying that jokingly, but I know that there's always a journey to get to any place that we are today. So share with us maybe some of the key challenges or pivotal moments that presented themselves along the way to get to where you are today.
Um, Certainly, I think it's as we were talking before, a, our journeys, our career paths are never straight line, and I say this to my students as well. Any woman that is in a leadership position, it has not been a straight line. It is filled with pivots. This is my third pivot actually in my career, and it's all about how you look at the obstacles that are presented. If you look at an obstacle as an obstacle, it's going to be, you're almost falling victim to the labels, to the underestimation, to the opinion of others.
Mhm.
Um, the the journey has to be not seeing everything as an obstacle, but actually looking at it as an opportunity. Any change, especially, is an opportunity. If you look at, growing up in a diverse environment, growing up with diverse experiences, really keeping your horizons really uh, big and all about experiences, that allows you to look at things as problems to be solved,
Mhm.
challenges to be solved, puzzles to be solved,
Yeah.
rather than an obstacle. And it gives you a different mindset. In my career, I started from being very, I mentioned I was in, actually, the first pivot came when I was the day before the entrance exams, university entrance exams. I changed my selection and did a dual degree in engineering and business, um, and then went into this career path of initially healthcare technology, then moved into something uh, less regulated, which is financial technology, financial services technology, which actually is not. But and then um, the last pivot was I really wanted to after the accumulation of all of this different experiences, I really wanted to make an impact because I was seeing while working at a quantitative investment firm as responsible for the technology department, I saw that decisions were being made with data that was, collected in 1960s and 70s, where
Mm.
we don't we're not a part of that data set,
We as in
and
women, or we as in.
we as diverse people,
Mm-hmm.
it's diversity, it's women. Um, we were not part of those decisions. The products that were being generated looking at history didn't include us. And
Yeah.
this is in a highly technically complex environment that was pretty much uh, deciding our future, the products and the financial systems that we're going to see and we're going to be buying. And we don't have a say in it. And that um, started my curiosity and my path to today, where my passion is an inclusive, responsible, and compliant implementation of AI, machine learning,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
in to improve people's lives.
Mm-hmm.
And um, that's why I'm with Stratyfy. That's
Mm-hmm.
why I'm there. I was their advisor for 2 years before becoming their COO. That's why I'm talking about removal of bias. I'm talking about transparency because 10 years ago, when I was in the quant shop, I saw a glimpse of what could be our future, and I didn't like it.
Mm. Yeah. Yeah. And now let's talk about, what I know is something we talked about even when I written did like your intro when I posted about this conversation coming up. Like, and we talk about this, the labeling, right? That's something I know it's like a tense area. You talked about, you came to this country and you were labeled as an immigrant, right? Um, Talk about that experience and what that looked like for you to be a woman that was, maybe kind of walk us through that experience of coming to this country, being labeled an immigrant, being labeled, or assume that certain thing, having certain assumptions made about you, being a woman in technology. Can you share a little bit more about that?
Um, sure. It was a very eye-opening experience. So I came here, going a little personal here. I came to this country for my master's. I already had 2 degrees undergrad. I was going to do my master's. I had about 5 job offers waiting for me. Um, and at this point, I was going to do my master's um, and go back. Um, I happened to meet my husband. Um, it was, I never dreamt of being away from my family. And he didn't want to live abroad. So we ended up getting married and got settled here. The moment we got married, I was labeled, or the moment I decided to stay and I was no longer a student, I was labeled as immigrant, and something
Mm-hmm.
that label I detest
Mm-hmm.
because, I'm a brain migration. I'm um, I refuse to be labeled as immigrant or any other label. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
think that's another thing. That's another conversation where we can go to,
Like you're good.
where where I cannot fill the census because it's labels.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Mm-hmm.
eh, the immigrant label. is an inferior, it's a label that comes with underestimation, it comes with inferiority.
Mm-hmm.
um, when I was here as an international student, I didn't get treated the same way the moment I was labeled. I didn't change, but overnight, it people talked slower. It was assumed that I didn't understand. I was unqualified, just
Mm-hmm.
because that label came with that,
Yep.
and it was incredibly. As I said, I detest that label.
Mm-hmm.
But take that further.
Mm-hmm.
As women in we you're at all the time. For example, being a mother means that, oh, you probably will not be able to fulfill the job's requirements,
Right.
when in fact being a mother means that you're going to be so efficient in multitasking that actually you're going to be the most efficient employee.
Yeah.
um, or um, let me take it to another point. It's if you're if you're a woman, it's assumed that you're not technical enough, even if you're actually have more knowledge of the what you're dealing with.
Yep.
So I can choose to make that. I can choose to accept that label, or I can
Mm-hmm.
choose to use that to my advantage.
Mm-hmm.
So my this is now I'm giving my trade secret.
Come on, let's hear it.
So I actually really love it when I walk into a room, or I am in the room and they're talking about some technical things, and I will ask a couple of questions, but it's assumed that I'm the non-technical one. So with that comes a lot of power, because you're actually understanding where the holes of the code is, where the architecture really doesn't make sense, or where this integration is going to fail, or you're not going to be able to support it as a product because you didn't think about the compliance aspect of it. So, but I will, but I learn all of that because people assume that I am not technical, and they'll talk freely in front of me because I don't understand in their mind.
Mm-hmm.
So that's actually quite a positive.
Oh yeah, I love it. Uh-huh. Going in, uh-huh, like the mole, right?
Again, I think I should, we're live. Oh no, I shouldn't have said this.
No worries, it's okay. But that's
So,
great though. You bring up a couple of really great points. And one is when you mentioned, people look at us and they put a label on us, and so there's an underestimation, and nothing's changed about us, but they assume because of the label that they put on us that immediately we're not capable, we're not qualified, we don't know something. And when the truth of the matter is that it's the furthest thing from the truth, and that is infuriating. I know that as a woman of color, like the
mhm,
estimations are underestimations that are made, you know, on us as women of color, and that is it's really fuel. It can be fuel depending on how you use it. And so, I want to know how you just shared one of those, is that underestimation can be very powerful, because you walk into a room and you're able to get a lot of great information because people think you don't know of something, and you end up being the solution, bringing solutions that really are bringing all these different gaps and holes together. And I just can think of so many women that might think that, well, because they underestimate me this way, that I can't perform. And in a lot of ways, that's very much true, right? Because there are very real roadblocks in the workplace because of those underestimations. But I think
mhm,
what I'm hearing from you is that there's a personal power that you can take back and say, I know that you underestimate me, but I'm going to be even more efficient, even more solution driven, because I'm getting all this information. Um,
mhm.
what as you think of, as you have had to move through those labels, how did you have to address them, internally or externally, to keep moving forward?
Such a great question, Valera. um, I don't have a silver bullet answer, though.
Yeah.
Would love to give a silver bullet answer, but I don't. Um, I think, um, as I mentioned, adaptation is key to moving past challenges you face. Your mindset, you can choose to be a victim or you can use this to your advantage.
Mhm.
I personally have not accepted any of the labels that have been
Mm.
placed.
Yeah.
Um, I don't even, as I mentioned, the census, those check boxes, I have a problem with.
Yeah.
Just because it, the world is not pluses and minuses.
Mm.
Um, a true inclusion, a true inclusion is including everyone
Mm. Yeah.
and not labeling them.
Mm.
And so when I, what I do is so first of all, internally, um, my mindset is probably one of the key things. I look at this as a puzzle. I look at um, the world as a puzzle that I have to figure out. So every obstacle is another. I made it to the next level of the game.
Mhm. Yep. Yep.
So because otherwise I wouldn't have had the puzzle. That challenge wouldn't be presented unless I made it to the next uh,
Hmm.
game. So if you look at the world as a puzzle or as a, that kind of helps you. The other thing is, um, by not accepting labels, I don't have to act as I am expected. I am not weighted down by these underestimations,
Hmm.
inferior things that will put inferior labels on me.
Hmm.
And um, that, of course, doesn't come easy. There's a lot of scars to show for it, but it's definitely a way of, um, I only have to look at following my passion, my
Exactly.
identity.
Hmm.
I don't need a label to define me. And I think that again goes really what I'm passionate about because with Stratify we're really looking at solving the bias problem, and it's not just in the data but in the models. It's looking at making the financial services much more inclusive, making healthcare much more inclusive. It is, we really need to look at it from technology could be a barrier, uh, promoting these um, embedded prejudices
Hmm.
to the future in a systematic way where you will not be able to break it in the future. So we have this opportunity to break it now,
Hmm.
um, and that's very important for me,
That makes sense.
because because again, I don't want a future with these labels, with um, uh, these labels inferior that associate prejudices
Yeah.
to others' identities.
That makes sense. I mean, and that's true. And I know that, I think a lot of times when I think about the labels, I wonder sometimes if it's that we don't put the labels on us, but we know the people have put the labels on us, and
Oh
that's
yeah.
the part of it for sure. We're very aware of it. And so, you know, dealing with that. And I think that's where my question comes to you now is what's the bias or the balance, I should say, of confronting people's bias or labels versus ignoring the noise? What do you think is that balance? I know there's no silver bullet answer, right? But what do you think is that balance of that? Is there a point where you just kind of say, or what's maybe your internal systems of that confrontation versus ignoring?
um, that's a very good question, Lara. I think we might have, we were just chatting about it before this, and I think it's a you cannot argue with a big system like society, systems that are embedded into the society, but you can change them. But the change means you are the one who's adapting, you're the one who's pivoting.
Mm,
So if this obstacle is in front of you, you move this way, that way, this way,
mm,
that way. So, for example, some biases I will firsthand um, confront because it is um, just you have to you it that for example when when there is a very direct discrimination in the workplace that needs to be confronted because
right.
that's how it's going to change.
Mhm.
um, in one of the companies I worked for, I was, which is not very surprising, I'm usually the first female manager or executive in those roles. In one of them, I was the first one, and I added, um, I div- I added so much diversity. We were about 30% diverse for that, for the technology department, for the development team, which is really big, but it is not enough. When 52% of our population is female,
Mm,
and
mm,
we can boast that we have 30%
mm,
um, diversity in technology, that's like, oh wow, this has never been heard of. This is like, or this is really a great success. I don't consider that a
mm,
success, but it is a way of moving forward. So it's certain things you definitely need to confront, certain things you
mm,
open people's eyes by sh- uh, your own actions.
mm,
One of the um, founders of the company that I was working on in another company, they were complimenting me, and I let me see if I can say, no matter what we throw at you, you seem to be adapting and solving these um, challenges.
mm,
Now, this was presented as a um, compliment,
mm,
but when you think about it, how many labels, how many negative things are embedded there?
mhm.
They bet on me to
Surprised,
fail.
right? Hmm. They were surprised. Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
That's that.
So,
Yeah, that's totally. I get what you're saying, and I think that's interesting that you talk about that. There's that expectation that you would fail, right, because of a label. Um, and that happens so often to a lot of people, a lot of women, a lot of people of color. What do you say, and this is obviously we're talking about women and who listen to this, but what do you say to the woman who's tired, she's tired of trying to prove to others that she's enough, or that may have underestimated her? What do you say to that woman that's tired?
um, I think you don't prove
Hmm.
um, this to anyone.
Yeah.
This is these are labels that you as a woman did not accept. Somebody else put it on you. Just like how overnight, the moment I got married, I was considered an immigrant. I never accepted it. I am Denise Johnson, and that's who I am.
Hmm.
I do not accept that label. That's somebody else's prejudices reflected on me. I don't
Hmm.
have to accept. That is actually quite freeing, because
Hmm.
then the only person that you have to um, satisfy is yourself.
Good.
For your own identity.
Mm.
You need to trust yourself. You those biases show somebody else's weaknesses, not
Good.
yours.
Very, very good point. Very good point. Refusing to accept it, um, I think, is taking the power back. And I think that's a good point about refuting it or refusing it. It removes some of the pressure to perform or to prove.
Yeah.
It's really about, I believe I'm qualified, I'm good enough. Whatever label you want to put on me, that's fine, but I'm not going to put that label on me. Think of a movie, um, Tyler Perry's movies, the Deer movies, and it's a funny line in there. He says to like the little girl in the scene, he says, "It's not what people call you; it's what you answer to." And
Hmm.
I thought, I just brought that up for a minute because it's true. It's like it doesn't matter what people, the label people put on you. Did you put that label on yourself? I know we've just got a couple of minutes, so I want to ask you maybe one or two more questions. But when you look back, you're a leading at a company, you're doing, you're helping startups. But when you look back, how has your own adversity made you a better leader or someone who actively helps other people that might have been labeled, whether it's a woman, whether it's a person of color, whatever that might be?
Um, so I always believe that your experiences define your normal. So I grew up in a very self-expressive, amazing, unique environment. Both my parents are artists. I grew up, um, you know, with a group of individuals that were interpreting things in a very creative, expressive way. They had a different energy, the smells, the thrill of growing up. Um, it's that experience, I think, broadened my horizons growing up with artist parents. Living the adversities I have, and I don't consider them adversities, they are more like puzzles, challenges,
Mhm.
um, ma- made me today. So I don't think I would go back and wish that anything changed. Well, I could, but it's not going to be helpful because I wouldn't make the decisions I'm making today if I had not lived through those. I would not be um, a, maybe as active in advocacy to ensure that women are represented in technical fields.
Mhm.
Um, eh, I would not be as vocal about AI being inclusive
Mhm.
um, if I hadn't lived through those. So all of those made me, uh, it made my new normal. It allowed me to now, at this stage, at this third pivot of my career, to focus on things that really, really are dear to my heart, that I'm passionate about, that I want to really solve for a better future. And I think that with that, um, I, as I said, everything defines um, your next experiences. Um, that the importance of diversity, the
Mhm.
exposure, the keeping, being intentional about having a very wide lens. These are
Mhm.
all things that came from those challenges.
Yes, those puzzles, right?
Those puzzles.
Those puzzles. I love that perspective. I love reshifting how you name something. A label, how you label something, definitely defines how you experience it, and get through it. Just one last minute, so I'll ask you, what message would you want? What final message would you want to give to any woman who about not letting others as underestimate her or put labels on? What would be that one thing you'd want a woman to walk away from after hearing this?
um, Trust in yourself, and you have the power to accept somebody else's prejudice or not.
Mhm.
And in this case, don't.
Love it. Absolutely love it. Don't take it. Don't accept
don't,
it.
don't accept it.
Don't
That's
accept
this is
it.
this is you labels. How we label ourselves is you know you have your own label, but it's um, when somebody else labels you,
Mhm.
that's their prejudice. That's their
Mm.
um, lack of that's their narrow mind when they look
Yes.
at you. So you
Yep.
don't have to accept it.
I love it. Let them be narrow minded, not you. I love it.
Exactly.
I love it, Denise. I absolutely love it. Well, I appreciate you so much for sharing your perspective today with our listeners. And I appreciate, I've just taken some nuggets away from our conversation. And to anyone that's watching this, both live or on demand, um, keep tuning in. We're having these conversations on Thursdays at noon Eastern for 30 minutes, just so you can break away from maybe what you're doing in your day to day work responsibilities and learning and growing together as women. So meet me here next week, LinkedIn Live or YouTube Live for Own Your Yes. Thanks again. Have a good rest of your day.
Thank you.